Embracing paradox. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Leonard Cohen. I mentioned previously that one of my favorite words is practice. I recently wrote a book titled Practicing, Changing Yourself to Change the World, which is centered on 10 important practices the world needs more of. Healing, listening, loving, including, equalizing, advocating, mourning, failing, resting, and celebrating. There's another ing concept that's an essential spiritual practice, not only for when Christmas is blue, but for all seasons. Embracing paradox. Paradox, contradicting things existing in the same space at the same time, has taken on new meaning for us since our son died. We felt the weight of the burden of holding a wide range of conflicting feelings in our hearts and souls. Paradox is a tricky thing to hold, so we often default to more simplistic, dualistic, either-or thinking. In the conservative faith system I ascribed to for a long time, either-or thinking, belief, and practice were prevalent. Things were either right or wrong, good or bad, sinful or godly, and a host of other binary choices. When I started talking to other people more bravely about my real life and struggles, I realized I wasn't alone. So many of us were wrestling with a divided life, squeezing contradictions out by swinging to one side or the other. Much of my Christian experience cemented this kind of thinking. Gray was considered unbiblical. Fear meant we weren't trusting God properly. Anger equated to a lack of spiritual maturity. Doubt indicated a lack of proper faith. The result? When negative feelings arose, I'd do anything possible to work diligently and faithfully to get rid of them as quickly as possible. This week, I couldn't help but think that one of the most important tools we can use to not only make it through the hard parts of this season, but all parts of our human experience, is the idea of embracing paradox. In fact, without cultivating this ability to hold together the widest possible range of experiences, peace on our journey is nearly impossible. We can't feel solid or free if we are constantly swinging from one extreme to the next, unable to hold the tension of contradictions about ourselves, others, God, and life in the same space. Embracing paradox, both and thinking, living, and practice has been incredibly transforming, not only in my life, but also in the lives of so many others I know. Now I'm learning to put two of my favorite words together in real life, practicing paradox. Trust me, it's a lot easier to say than to do. In fact, it's brutally hard on a soul to live with the reality of our family's deep grief in the middle of so many positive things in our lives at the same time. Vocations we love, 4 other young adult children launching into their careers and futures, and the birth of our new nonprofit called Community Heals, dedicated to making spaces for transformation accessible for all. My husband and kids have all shared that we sometimes feel bad for feeling good, for smiling in pictures, for laughing when our hearts are so broken, but we're trying to learn how to practice paradox and embrace grieving and living at the same time. One feeling or reality doesn't completely discount the other. Rather, they can live in the same space at the same time. Dr. Henry Cloud, in his book Changes That Heal, fleshes out the idea that emotional maturity is learning how to hold good and bad in the same space. When things become either all good or all bad instead of both good and bad at the same time, it's dangerous and causes us to split off parts of ourselves in a destructive way. Life is never all good or all bad, all dark or all light. Even in the darkest of dark days after losing our son, there was and is light. People's tenderness towards us, whispers of love, hugs from our kids, the unconditional love of our dog, the sun rises every morning. These glimmers, mixed in with the worst of the worst, have sustained us. However, looking for light doesn't mean we minimize, dismiss, or rationalize the dark. We don't try to squeeze it out, only focus on the good, or toss out a few scriptures to make it all better. No, the dark and light need to exist together. The hard and the good, the beauty and the mess, peace and chaos, hope and despair, love and hate coexisting in our own lives, in the people around us, and in the wider world. Embracing paradox has a ripple effect, but like all things, it always starts with ourselves. Father Richard Rohr says, if you can hold and forgive the contradictions within yourself, you can normally do it everywhere else too. Yes, embracing paradox can make us weary. Really, I just want the grief to finally be done so I can be back to all of the good that existed before that tragic day. But I know that's only a falsity that feels comforting. Even before Jared died, we were holding all kinds of contradictions together in our lives and souls. It's part of every human experience. It's just massively amplified. I am finding that holding this much pain creates a mysterious and holy space. Mirabai Starr, an interspiritual professor and author, reminds us, the path of the mystic reconciles contradictory propositions, such as harrowing sorrow and radical amazement, and blesses us with an expanded capacity to sit with ambiguity, to treasure vulnerability, to celebrate paradox as the highest truth. She goes on to say, we are conditioned to see death and painful longing as problems to be solved rather than as sacred landscapes to be revered. We are encouraged to medicate our grief, to treat loss as a malfunction that needs troubleshooting, to satisfy our longing as swiftly as possible. A lot of our Christian Western culture teaches us either-or thinking, and that all our dissonance is something to be resolved as quickly as possible. Yet almost all of the ways of Jesus embody a both-and rather than an either-or. Jesus' birth doesn't make sense in some ways and brings it all together in another. It's ugly and smelly and also beautiful and hopeful. 3 decades later, Jesus, the one who was supposed to save the day with kingly strength and might, dies on a cross, leaving so many even more confused. The essence of the Jesus story is that we rise by descending. It's a mystery, yet it's simple. It's easy to talk about and hard to live out. I'm sure you can think of a lot of other contradictory words to describe it. As we travel this road towards Christmas, my hope for myself, my family, and those who are struggling with this season is to try and embrace the paradoxes of our own lives, people we're connected to, and the wider world. Here's why. Embracing paradox can help us to learn to accept all the parts of ourselves instead of rejecting our weaknesses and being mad at God and ourselves for not fixing ourselves quickly enough. Develop keener eyes to see together the beauty and ugliness and all the other kinds of wild contradictions that exist in other people and institutions instead of only focusing on one or the other. Increase the capacity for grace for ourselves and others. There's no downside to cultivating more grace in this harsh world. Stop setting ourselves up in relationships where we're the all good or all bad person. Develop a resiliency that is impossible when we demand things to be either or. We can see joy and suffering, peace in tribulations, and wholeness and healing in brokenness. Widen our ability to intersect with people very different from us. This is essential for a life of downward mobility and incarnational living. I'm guessing this idea of paradox isn't new to many of you. You've been holding contradictory things together in your story for a long time. Regardless, no matter how much we know we need to hold paradox, it's simpler to talk about it in an intellectual sense than to truly embrace it in the crevices of our hearts and experiences. The lectionary passage for this 3rd week of Advent includes Mary's Magnificat, sprinkled with paradox. She sings, "He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty." In this 3rd week together, we'll walk through embracing paradox during this season and remembering there's light in the darkness, beautiful in the ugly, peace in the chaos, hope in despair.